All right, so next we have Sarah Smith. Sarah is the CEO of Speaker Box Media. Can you guess who she's married to? She is the leading sales and account strategy person for the company. She has a passion for helping businesses communicate their niche, their goals, and smash them. Like that. Okay, next we have, where am I? We have Ozeal. Ozeal is in the house. So Ozeal runs a group here in Houston for podcasters called Pod Houston. And he came and spoke at my first conference, which was 3 weeks before the world shut down in 2020. And we were all hugging and high-fiving.
I was breakdancing on stage.
You were breakdancing on the stage. It was a whole thing.
We were happy.
And now you've done all kinds of things since then. I'm going to touch on a few of them. Yeah. So you're a podcast branding strategist, a podcaster. You are the visionary founder of Creator Factor, a thriving hub for creator entrepreneurs. So welcome. We're so glad you're here. And last but definitely not least is Yvette Valdenegro. She is a podcaster, a speaker, and a relationship expert. So if you need therapy afterwards, you know where to go. She has a strong focus on impact, elevation, transformation, and she empowers leaders across various industries to take charge of both their personal and professional lives. So we are so glad that y'all are here. I ask each one of these people to be here because of they all bring different things to the table, and I wanted to give y'all a taste of several different things. So we touched on interviews in the first section, but I want to dive a little bit deeper because something we should have talked about is there's lots of different kinds of shows that you can have. You can have a solo show, you can have a co-host, you can do an interview show, and we all do, different kinds of shows. But as you're creating the format of your show, you want to determine what kind of show you want to have, how long your show should be. And when I coach people, I always say, because people are like, how long should my podcast be? Should it be 10 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour? And I was like, it depends on your audience, because Joe Rogan can talk to somebody for hours and hours and people will watch it and they will listen, right? I work with a lot of busy moms. They want to get in and out. So I don't chitter chatter. I get right into the meat of it. I get in, I give them what they need and get out because I know my audience. So I just wanted to interject that, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So Yvette, how do you select guests for your podcast and what is your process in preparing them?
Okay, I'll do selection first. I feel like our podcast is very specific to women right now. And so one, it has to be something that a woman really wants to listen to. And for sure, what you just said. So we've just taken our client and we've said, who is our client and what do they need? What do they want? What are their, like you said, pain points? What do they want to hear? So a lot of our content actually comes from our clients because they're our inspiration. We're really listening to their hearts and we really want to answer the questions that they have. So for example, if they want to talk about money or money seems to be an issue, then we'll do a segment or different episodes on money, and then we'll have an expert come in and talk about it because we know that we're not the expert in everything. We're really just coaching. So like everyone said earlier, there's a lot of, we like statistics because I think that statistics tell the truth. And sometimes we play stories in our head that we think something's going one way, but it's like, well, but statistically, this is kind of in general what's happening. So we do a lot of statistics as far as prep, but when we go search for someone, most of the time it is because we're working on a specific piece that they want to hear. And then as far as the prep, we have a media kit that we put together. I found that it's a lot easier just to say, hey, we use a certain program. This is how you're going to get on. These are things to expect. Our podcast, and I'm so sorry, I was listening and I'm like, we're a little different. We do it live. We don't do a lot of prepping because we want that, what you guys just heard. We want the behind the scenes talking, the giggling, the what are you really here for, being really real. So when we're bringing on a guest, it's very much, hey, we're so glad you're here, but then we just get right into it. But the prep behind the scene is definitely, they get a PDF. They know how we're going to get on, that there's what we call the green room behind the stage. And we just kind of prep them that way. We do ask for, do they have a picture? Do they have logos? And is there something specifically that they really want to get across to the audience? Because it's there for them too.
Can you describe any challenges that you faced when conducting interviews and how have you overcome them?
All right. So as far as you were asking about conducting challenges for conducting interviews.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Okay. So I think everything is preparation is key, right? So you got to make sure that you're well prepared before you conduct a podcast interview. Challenges, obviously, especially if being a live streamer. Live streaming is a whole different animal. There's always tech issues happening with live streaming, but you have to roll with the punches. And I think it's important to make sure that you stay composed, make sure that you keep it going, right? Keep it rolling. And also, I think another thing that's been a big challenge as an interviewer is when you have guests that become a bit long-winded sometimes. So those who do interviews. So remember, you're the commander of your ship. This is your show. So you want to give them space for them to be able to share a thought, but it's okay to interrupt. So if you know they're going to veer off, which, 9 times out of 10 is going to happen, make sure that you bring them back to the topic. Why? Because your listeners would really appreciate that. So make sure that you keep that in mind. After a while, I'll give them a minute, and then if I say they're going on a different topic, I'm like, great, let's go back a little bit. Let's stop right there, and then we'll talk about something you just said. So make sure that you're always listening, taking notes, but you got to bring them back.
Okay, Sarah, what are some techniques for creating and engaging insightful interviews that resonate with your listeners?
Wow, yeah, there's a lot there. One is knowing who that is. That's super important. Right, Ray hit on that. We're really big at SpeakerBox about positioning. It's so important to know who you're talking to. And like Oziel said, you're the captain of the ship. What we like to say, you're the advocate for your audience. In the room, you're the advocate for the person that's listening because you're trying to help them. You're trying to help the person that you're interviewing, help them maybe. And so I think when it comes to actually interview crafting, one, looking for the gems, finding things that they haven't talked about before. So that's looking at their interviewees, looking at previous speaking engagements if they've had them. If they have an EPK, getting that ahead of time and just taking that extra 45 minutes to an hour to really dig into it. Find out who their kids are, find out what they do, and connect on that human level first. And then when we talk about tactically interviewing things, there are some, there's plenty of interview books and things that you can read that talk about things like this. But one of the things that I know is, especially when you first start podcasting, is you want to ask questions like, what is the most, or what is the best, or what is the biggest? And what those questions do is they really intimidate us, because they put us in this mindset of where we have to be really thoughtful and really insightful, and they kind of put people on the edge. And so sometimes just thinking about the language and how you ask questions. How can my question be crafted in a way that's welcoming and more disarming? So that's a big one that I like to think about. The second thing is when that red light turns on, or you feel like people are watching you, there's something that happens to all of us. We want to button up and we want to sit up straight. And what we really don't realize is that we're all humans first. Right. And so sometimes uncomfortable things are going to happen. Tender moments are going to happen when you're having tender conversations. And sometimes we fight to hold those things back instead of just leaning into them. If something awkward happens, let it happen. If someone's, shirt's unbuttoned, help them button it up. It's funny how these little nuances and human things that we do really connect the most. When a mom's talking about her kids and tears up, there's not one mom in the room that doesn't also tear up. And why does that happen? Because it's how we relate. And so I think sometimes on camera and interviews, people get so focused on that question or trying to get that message across instead of having a conversation. So I always, even going into interviews, Amber was talking about this earlier, I like to disarm the person. Hey, we're talking about something you know a lot about. And even if I find that when you're talking, we're all trying to be insightful, build our own authority or whatever. If we can remember who we were 5 years before that, if I could talk to myself 5 years before where I am now, I have a lot to say. But if I have to talk to future me, or I'm trying to build too high or go too high, it's harder to converse. So I always try to, when we sit down for an interview, sit down, remind them we're talking about something that you know really well. Nobody tells your story better than you. Nobody knows it better than you. And then the second thing is we're here to help somebody. So even if we only helped one person, that's okay. And that takes the weight off of this thing having to go perfect, us having to be pros at this, and instead opens the floor to just authentically have a conversation.
Let me just throw this question out to everybody and whoever wants to take it. What strategies have you found most effective in building a loyal community around your podcast? So if you think about a podcast, a lot of the content is one way. You're having a dialogue with someone, but the listener is not an active participant. So how do you build community around your podcast? Go.
Okay, I'll just say one small one. For sure, we use StreamYard, and we love the fact that because it connects to Facebook, so people instantly can, when we go live, so we have it live, you can do the questions there, or later on they can send in their, or just make comments there too. We welcome the DMing, the messaging that way. The other thing you said too that we love to do is we'll invite someone to be on our podcast, and then we immediately go on to theirs. So as far as scheduling, making sure that you're ready, the prep, connection with each other. It's at first I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to feel like salt and pepper or like oil and vinegar because it's just different. It's worked tremendously because the time that it takes. And then we actually flow. Sometimes we've done it where we've done part one is we're talking one subject, but then it flows into part two. And then part two, you have to go see it and listen to it on their podcast. Yeah. So again, it engages our audience, their audience, people who've never even listened or even knew who we were. And then they find us and they go, oh, now you're on. It just works. It's an even, and it just works really great.
Yeah, that's so good. Ozil, you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I run Pod Houston, as Misty mentioned. It's a podcast community here in Houston. And actually, Ray and I were talking about this. Building a community is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. So I find podcasters, clients who say, I just want to start a Facebook group and I want to start doing meetups like you do. And I'm like, wait, hold on, because it's a lot of work, because I would rather you not start a community if it's going to be poorly done. What I mean by that is that it takes work to be engaged, to be active in a Facebook group, to ask questions. I see, people who try to do Facebook groups and then they're just posting motivational memes and they're just trying to create content, and it just doesn't work. People want real engagement, for you to become a resource, right? And for them to feel welcome and for them to connect with other members. So if you want to start a community, make sure you ask yourself, am I willing to commit? And also, I like the 3 W's, the who, right? So who are you going to serve and for what, right? So for example, for Pod Houston, it's more like, who is it for? It's for indie podcasters who live in Houston, who want to learn and get connected with other podcasters. Very much like Misty, right? So who is it for? For indie podcasters with Christian faith-based who want to connect around other Christian-based podcasters. So make sure you get very clear on who you're going to speak to, because that will identify your community and then you can build it up. So again, that's what I do with Pod Houston. And I mean, it's a lot of work, but I enjoy it. I've been doing it for over 5 years. The community has grown over 2,000 members. So it's been amazing to kind of keep them engaged and keep them going. So.
Yeah, I remember when I started Spark, I went straight from having a podcast to hosting a conference. He was like, you didn't even host a meetup in between there. Like, are you sure you want to do this? What? You just jumped right in. Do you remember that?
I remember you had the idea.
Yeah.
And Missy's like, I'm going to just do a conference. I'm just inspired by this meetup. It's like, you want to do a meetup? She's like, nah. And next thing you know it, she made a conference happen. So you completely made that big leap. So respect.
But I love that, because that just goes to show you, like, authentically, like there's rules and there's best practices, but you can forge your own path.
That's right.
And doing it your way, when you know your audience and you know who you're trying to help, you know who you're trying to reach, you know where they're at online, you know which problems they have because you're talking to them so often, then you have to kind of lean into your own way of doing it. So someone may say, this platform isn't for you, you shouldn't do it, try it. My husband's he's a big tester, and I love that about him. I'm very methodical, I'm very detail oriented, but he's a very MVP person. Put it out, test over a defined period of time, see what's working, see what's not, see if you're getting comments on StreamYard. If not, what about Instagram? What about Facebook? What about an in-person meetup? Maybe your people aren't online, they're more in-person people, but testing. And I think the other thing is always value. Be looking to give before you're looking to ask for something. I think is really big. I think a lot of people start communities with this idea like to leverage them. And I see it go wrong so often. You have to be committed to giving value to your community before you ever ask anything of them. And ask being a call to action, ask being putting an ad in there, these type of things that you see done, a lot of the time they're done by people who have spent time building a community, because it is a trusting relationship. So thinking about how to first give value over your time, value first, and then second, thinking about how you can test in like a minimally viable environment to make sure that you're getting good positive signals that what you're doing and all the effort you're putting in is working.
That's so good. Serve, 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 serve,
Oh
serve,
my gosh, I
serve,
was
sell.
just gonna say that.
Serve, sell. Right? So serve.
One of the best things to do is go to a group and say, what can I do to help? Because that's where you're going to learn. And I always think, if you can't serve someone else, how are you really going to serve the people that you want to serve? Because it comes from your heart. That's right. So if you do it and just be, hey, what can we do? How we can serve, and just let it grow organically, because that's really where the spice is.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. Okay, so I got another question. How have collaborations with other podcasters and industry experts impacted your community growth? So let's start with you, Yvette.
Yeah. So our coaching business is called YG Collaborations. So from day one, everything my business partner and I, everything we ever did was it's a team. We're how to collaborate, why we're collaborating, the vision, the purpose, and I think it just kept going from there. But everything we do, we network in, I think, too many groups sometimes. But for us, the collaboration is really the connection. That's the piece of, hi, I'm meeting you, you're meeting me. How can we really, again, back to service, how can we really serve each other? Who is your audience? Who is listening when it comes to the podcasting? Or even if when we're coaching our clients, we're wanting to know how, even with our clients, how can we collaborate with you to help serve you? Serving has always been a foundation. It just opens the door. It puts everything at peace and just welcomes people to go, okay. And the genuine part of that, because again, it's going to be for you and it's for them. And you just learn so much from that. But I feel like the collaboration part of it has always been part of what we do. I really don't even know how to do life without collaborating. I think I'd be lost going, where's everybody? How are we gonna do this?
I heard collaboration starts at the top and competition is at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
I heard somebody say that
That's
on the
good.
podcast.
No
I like this one.
competition.
Stop. Collaborate and listen.
Hang on, don't get me started.
No competition.
Yes, one of my friends and great clients, he always says that the tide raises all boats, and I truly believe that. So like when I think about like collaboration, and even when I'm talking to clients or other people, I think about like, how do you know who to collaborate and when to collaborate? So I think about collaboration like an ecosystem, like around your business or your service or your community. What does that ecosystem look like? There's institutions, there's governments, there's other groups maybe, or influencers in that space. There's speakers or leaders in that space. And so when you're looking for collaborations, thinking about your map as like a web. What dots connect to which and why? What city, government, other independent groups or organizations also fit within my industry? And then I can start creating off of there. So just thinking about the different layers. So for example, we focus on B2B podcasting, but I know Oziel focuses on independent podcasting. I know Misty focuses on Christian podcasting. And so I really think about the podcast community as an ecosystem. And now I know Coach. And so, yeah, I really think about it as an ecosystem, and there is enough for everyone. This scarcity mindset that I feel like it drives like competitiveness sometimes is something that I hope disappears sooner than later, especially in the podcast community in Houston. But there's enough for all of us. We all have enough space to build our own authority and resources. And actually, I've had so many times happen where maybe somebody came to me for something and I wasn't the right fit, but just being able to be an answer for them and refer them to somebody else, that left off a better relationship than it would have been in the first place. So always thinking of collaboration through that lens is that ultimately you're looking to be a solution and an answer for somebody, and that might not be you. You might know someone better suited for that. And that's always served me well. Serving squared, right? Being exponential and giving everything that you can away, because it always comes back.
What tactics have you used to successfully grow your audience? Ozil?
Oh, wow. Let's see, right at me. All right, so let's say, okay, so here's one thing that I've discovered, and I'm actually curious to know your thoughts. Social media, and I know we're gonna talk a little bit about social media. I noticed that social media, I don't get much uptake on social media because in social media, these are people that are already following you. So your objective to market and grow your audience is to get in front of other podcast listeners. How do you do this? Well, you can actually pitch podcastaddict.com, Castro.fm, and pitch these podcast apps to be featured on their main channel and their newsletter. Another thing is newsletters. So if you have let's say, for example, a keto, a podcast, reach out to newsletters that have keto oriented content and say, hey, listen, I would like to run an ad for my podcast. How much is advertising? A lot of the times you'll be surprised. They don't like, oh, well, sure. Nobody's ever asked me. So you can actually negotiate with newsletters within your industry so you can start promoting your podcast. So I'm getting in a place where I'm getting real creative. I'm not doing much social media. I'm trying to attract podcast listeners and go where they're at. So podcast apps to get featured. We're talking about newsletters. PR, like getting interviewed on magazines and blog posts, and also paid ads. I've worked with clients with this marketing firm on running paid ads, like malpod.com. There's a podcast at Castro.fm. These are ones where you can actually get in front of their audience and say, this is a business podcast. This is a Christian-based show. Let me get my podcast in front of the audience. And these are people that are actually listening to podcasts. And I find that the most effective way to market. I've got 1,000 downloads. That's actually the fastest I jumped quickly on this new podcast. 6 episodes, I got over 1,000 downloads now, simply because I was using tactics that target podcast listeners, not on social media. And that's what I'm working on now.
That's
It's been
good.
working. Yeah,
that's really good.
Yeah.
And how do you measure success or track growth of your audience?
Yeah, ROI is something that comes up in the very first conversation for us and our clients. We're a B2B focus, so ROI is top of the list. I mean, you're competing with very traditional marketing tactics, but I think when you think about return on investment, you have to understand what you're after. So getting specific listener numbers or getting specific impression numbers on social media, those are all great. They're all positive indicators that what you're doing is working. People are tuning in. But what you're really looking for is some type of conversion, and that looks different for everyone else, right? So I love that you brought up kind of one of the things that you have to think about in order to get return is distribution. And that's kind of what you're hitting on with, looking at other networks, looking at other avenues. But one of the other things I want to really hone in on here when you're thinking about return is owned media versus rented media. Social media is rented space. It's space that's out there for free. It's fantastic for organic reach. I mean, people, all of a sudden you see everybody jumping over to Threads and TikTok and all these things, and it's because the organic reach is great. But you could have 40 million followers and have zero conversion on those followers because you don't own that. Whereas if I own a newsletter and I have 100 very engaged people on that newsletter, or I have 1,000 very engaged community folks that will show up at events for me and will convert, that's a different level of metric. And so I'll say this, not all metrics are created the same.
That's right.
So understand what you're looking to gain. If that's a newsletter, if that's, no, I'm looking to book this many sales calls, or I'm hoping that a couple of these convert to clients, whatever that metric is, be clear about that going in and understand how you're going to measure that. And then I guess to top it off, here's the other thing is I always look for positive traction in the right direction. So for example, one of the first things I noticed when I first started hosting my podcast is I started getting invited to speak. And for me, that was beneficial at the time. I was trying to build my authority. I was a newer agency owner. So being on stages in front of other advertising and marketing professionals, that's what I needed. And so for me, did I get a monetary return from that speaking engagement? Well, not at first, but that traction helped tell me that what I was doing was positive. So what positive indicators can you measure initially? And then, of course, later on down the road, what monetary goal, or if there is one, that you're trying to hit. Maybe that's book speaking engagements, maybe it's clients, maybe it's advertisement dollars, but being very clear about that and understanding it takes time. ROI takes time. There's no get rich scheme. We all see Joe Rogan now, and it's like, oh, he got however many million. But it's like, I was watching back when he's in UFC days, and his podcast was terrible, and he didn't have any listeners, So it's really easy to look at someone else and measure, but forge your own path of ROI, understand what you're after, and figure out how to measure that consistently to know whether you're hitting those goals.
That's so good. So good. I had a conversation with a guy today who booked an appointment with me because he has a huge following on TikTok. And he's like, but nobody's subscribing to my podcast. So what do I do? And so I said, create a lead magnet and find a way to share it in a TikTok video to get people on your email list. Then you can send them to your long form content once you have their email. So that's having that newsletter. That's so important. But understanding, are you doing this as a hobby or is it for a business? Are you trying to sell more courses, or are you doing it for the purpose of numbers? Really understanding your why, I think, is so crucial. Okay, I've got one last question, Yvette. Have you found any unique or unconventional methods for audience growth that others may not consider?
I don't know necessarily, because I think everybody does so much that I don't know necessarily unique, but one thing we just switched to is we were doing the stereotypical 40 to 50 minute podcasts, and we would talk forever, and we think we're entertaining and we think we're funny. But we found when we switched to doing series where it's like 4 in a row, but they're only 15 to 20 minutes max, our engagement, it was a game changer. And again, to know your audience. So again, busy women who just want the hit, or when they go, they see the name of the episode and it's like, is that for me? No. Is that for me? No. Is that for me? No. But oh yes, that one. And then it's just 15 minutes. It's a walk. It's in the car, going to your grocery store. Because I know for me too, I love listening to podcasts, but you listen to it, then you go in the grocery store, you got to do something, you get a phone call 2 days later, and you're like, wait a minute, let me rewind 10 minutes to catch back to where I was. I like the quick hits. So that's not necessarily unique, but it definitely was a game changer for us. Really, and listening, your audience will tell you what they want to hear. Don't go against that grain. You may think, oh, we're going to talk about puppies and kittens. Your audience never asked for puppies and kittens. Speak to what they're wanting, and it works. It's been serving us.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. So where can people connect with you?
Okay, a couple things. YG Collaborations is the name of the website. The podcast is Redesigning Your Relationships. Me personally, it's just Yvette Valdenegro on Instagram, but all the platforms, you can listen to us on all of them. We definitely like engaging through social media. I think that's also been I know a lot of people don't like it. We've taken the StreamYard, make little clips, and then we just do 10, 15 second little whatevers. We do everything live, so that definitely leads into the imperfections. And I think we thrive on those. We've had trains, we've had kids, we've had everything you could even imagine and more. But I think that people like the rawness of, what we're saying.
The authenticity.
Yeah. That we're real women telling real stories. But all the normal ways of getting hold of everybody. But YG Collaborations is where you'd want to go.
Okay. Sarah, what about you?
So speakerboxmedia.com, of course, our website. I am most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So on LinkedIn, I'm Sarah Smith, Speakerbox Media. Instagram, I am _Sarah Smith, and it's with an H, Sarah with an H. But yeah, I love talking to everyone back and forth. So if you have any questions or you're wondering about a concept, I'd love to chat, love to build community online. I find that the best way to meet new friends and audience share.
So a couple of marketing unique things before I get into The plug. Okay, so flyers. I'm old school, so I used to be in a band and I used to do flyers. I believe that if there's, especially with niche, that's the reason. When you niche down, your marketing becomes easy. So that's the importance of niching down. It just makes it so much easier. When you're talking about different things, it's just hard to market to different avatars. So very, very important. The riches is in the niches, as they say, right? Okay, so flyers. I had a friend who had a comic book podcast, and I would say, hey, dude, you need to go ahead and print out a flyer and let people know about your podcast. And he created this beautiful graphic. Yes, you do that, Misty, very well. So he went to comic book stores and he was putting the flyer in all the comic books, and he worked out a deal with the owners, and he was getting some pretty extra 2,000 to 3,000 downloads simply because why? It was a target audience. They love comic books, and they were just getting flyers of like, oh, this is a cool podcast I may like, and they became fans. So that live streaming, I believe that's very underutilized. I feel like live streaming adds that personal brand, that live, authentic vibe. So I would like to see podcasters utilize live streaming to just personalize the pre-recorded content. They hear the pre-recorded stuff, but when they hear you live, they get a whole different layer of what you do, right? And then the other thing that I was thinking about is I would love to see more of this. And what I mean by this is that if I'm a podcaster within a specific niche, I will go to meetup.com and I would find specific meetups and reach out to the moderator or the host and say, hey, can we post up and do a live recording session, a podcast where we do Q&A? It's right up our alley. It's your audience. I think we're going to see more live podcasts happening on set with a live audience. I think that's going to be with signage of your show. I think that's going to be a great marketing way to really promote your podcast. So let's get creative. I think marketers can get lazy, especially podcasters. Let's start getting creative and thinking outside the box because there's a lot of untapped potential out there to really kind of expand your podcast growth. So I'm going to encourage that.
That's so good. So this workshop is actually called Created to Create, and Amber hosts these here in the studio every 6 weeks, a different topic. So she had a film guy here 6 weeks ago. I brought my son, who I'm hoping will get into video editing. He does podcast editing right now, and I'm like moving in that direction. So she's always going to be hosting other, Ozeal hosts things, but you're right that people are going on tours, like musicians
Smartless,
on stages.
Netflix,
Annie
crazy.
Downs does a tour where she and Carlos Whitaker go and have, they'll hit so many cities. And so, this is great. And I think there's nothing like being in person. And the more we can do live and in person is great. So Ozeal, where can people find you?
So at Ozeal Creates and creatorfactor.net. And you can get all the distribution if you listen on Apple, Spotify, etc. So highly encourage it for you guys to check it out. So for content creators who are building brands online. And so we're all content creators. So I expect subscribes and downloads from all of you.